Welcome back to Two Hearts, where stories are weaved to explore the beauty of diverse cultures and the depths of human connection. Is it fate or something else to be rescued from calamity by an agitator from the past? One chance encounter opens up the floodgates of memories, adding complexity to an already tumultuous history. Follow Jasmine and Kai as they confront their past and decide if their love is strong enough or if they're simply making the same mistake twice. Please enjoy Second Chances. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so that more members of our community can continue to find content like this.
Having always prided herself on her punctuality, Jasmine Walker sat in frustration at knowing that this dilemma was not only going to make her late, but would likely ruin the beautiful silk ensemble she was now second-guessing having worn, considering the torrential downpour. As the rain pounded against the windshield, Jasmine gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white with tension. Her car, a reliable sedan, had suddenly rumbled to a stop due to a flat tire, and she now found herself stranded on the side of the interstate. She fumbled with her phone, trying to call her roadside service agent for help, but the signal was spotty on this particular stretch of the highway. Just as she was about to give up, a light tapping and a familiar face appeared at the passenger side window through the rain. Kai Johnson, her ex-husband, stood there, his umbrella shielding him from the deluge. "Jasmine, it's okay, I've got you," he shouted through the glass, his voice steady and reassuring. Rolling down the window, she watched as Kai leaned in slightly to avoid the pummeling drops. "How did you know it was me?" was the first and only thing Jasmine could think to say to the man in 5 years. "The tags," he chuckled, shrugging off his suit jacket and tossing it on her passenger seat before heading back to his vehicle, likely to grab his tools. Jasmine, caught off guard, felt a surge of emotions: relief, surprise, and a lingering resentment, all feelings that she could not ignore. JWNOTJJ. Jasmine Walker, not Jasmine Johnson, had been a petty thing to incorporate into vanity plates, but at the time of their nasty divorce, she'd needed a hard and fast delineation and public reminder for herself and everyone else. Despite going their separate ways, for months on end, she'd still been referred to as Mrs. Johnson no matter where she went, even after indicating otherwise. And to this day, though the adjustment had gotten considerably better, sorting out her personal and legal documents post-divorce had been nothing short of a war of attrition. Kai had been her everything once, but their marriage had crumbled under the weight of his career ambitions and wandering eye. As an investment banker, he was always chasing the next big prospect, schmoozing and wielding deals, and surrounded by the kind of people who made love and marriage seem like an unmerited punishment. His lifestyle back then had no room for Jasmine in it, which often left her feeling neglected, less than, and alone. She had been an IT systems administrator, capable of working from anywhere, but even that flexibility couldn't fill the void of his absence. During their marriage, he had missed countless dinner reservations, forgotten her birthday, and had stayed away on long business trips, leaving Jasmine to realize that she'd never be able to compete. As Kai changed her tire, Jasmine watched him, her mind a whirlwind of memories and unresolved feelings. She remembered the early days of their relationship, filled with laughter and love, and the painful descent into a marriage of missed opportunities and unmet needs. Soaked to the bone, Kai returned to the window less than 20 minutes later. His bespoke dress shirt clung to his muscular frame as water dripped from his short, cropped hair and down every inch of his exposed mocha-colored skin, but he did not appear annoyed or put out. Jasmine hated the physical effect this image of him had on her suddenly flushed body, but she simply could not look away. "Jasmine," he voiced in a tone that should have brooked no argument, but since she didn't answer to him anymore, she simply rolled her eyes at the critique she knew was coming. "This is too nice of a car for you not to have a spare tire." "I've never needed one before," she shrugged dismissively, despite knowing he was right. She'd eat the wet asphalt on the side of the road before she'd admit that to him, though. Well, the good news is that I've got your donut on securely, but you should still take your car over to the dealer to have the blown tire replaced. It looks like you hit some sort of debris in the road because the rubber is completely shredded, Kai explained to her patiently. I actually don't have time. I figured you'd say that, Jazz, he interrupted knowingly. Look, driving on a donut is meant to be a temporary stopgap, and I already know that you won't think about it anymore as long as your car moves. So, I've gone ahead and called a wrecker service to come and tow it to the dealership by your house. Jasmine opened her mouth, a retort at the ready. And before you complain, I can take you wherever you need to go in the meantime, and then drop you off to pick up the car after. Come on, you can wait in my car until they arrive. Kai outlined as if making these sorts of decisions on her behalf was still a normal and acceptable thing for him to be doing. Jasmine had wanted to be angry at him for being so presumptuous, borderline smug, but after receiving the urgent call from her attorney and friend Vera Shaw, Jasmine did not have time to debate with her ex. Fine, let me get my things, she acquiesced. The first time he'd seen her again, it had felt like a punch to the gut. A half-decade of distance and regret evaporated in an instant, leaving only the raw, aching memory of what they once had. Kai had noticed the sleek car, seen the flashing hazard lights, and had known in an instant who it was. Veering across 2 congested lanes and onto the shoulder, he'd pulled up behind his ex-wife's vehicle to assist her, despite the years and the pain between them. Kai had spent the past 5 years chasing success, driven by the ghost of their past and the haunting echo of her words. You'll never be ready for me, and I'll never be enough for you, Kai. She had been right, of course. Back then, he was a reckless playboy, too busy climbing the corporate ladder and having his ego stroked to commit to anything beyond his own ambition. But now, he was a different man, or at least he hoped he was. At seeing him at her window, Jasmine's eyes had met and held his, and for a moment, time stood still. Then, with a flicker of something he couldn't name, she'd blinked, effectively breaking the spell and leaving Kai to grapple with the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. Yes, he had stopped to assist a woman in distress, a woman who he had a long history with, a woman who, he realized as he looked at her for the first time in ages, still had the biometric combination to his heart. But as he observed her shocked-turned-stoic expression through the pellets of water, he wondered if he was too late. Thank you, Jasmine muttered, once he'd guided her from her vehicle and led her carefully to the passenger side of his car. She watched him eye her cautiously, as if he were making mental notes that somehow escaped his subconscious and registered across his handsome face. Once he appeared satisfied that she was nestled securely in the passenger seat, he closed her door. What do you mean it's not legal? Jasmine raised her voice in a way that was sure to render her throat raw and sore later that evening. Jazzy, I know you're upset, but… Vera, you just told me that the dissolution of my marriage isn't valid. I've been living my best life as a happy divorcee for 5 years. What if I had remarried? What if I had children? No, I'm not upset, I'm livid, Jasmine shrieked. You have every right to be, but we will get things sorted out as soon as possible, Vera soothed her irate friend. How does something like this even happen? Jasmine asked, her head in her hands on the conference room table, and her voice now registering not much higher than a whisper. Shuffling through her notes, Vera pulled out the document in question. Well, it appears that there was some sort of procedural error. From what I can see, although the agreed final orders were signed by both parties, they were not appropriately submitted. And since Kai was the last to sign, he was responsible for entering them with the courts, Jasmine surmised. Yes, or in this case, his attorney should have been. Either way, they are going to hate to see me coming, Vera assured as she jotted down notes on a few post-its and stuck them to several pages of the packet in front of them. So does Kai even know what he didn't do? Jasmine looked up to ask. I can't be sure. I don't know if the omission was deliberate on Kai's part or negligent on his lawyers, but I intend to find out. As far as right now, I'd only learned of it a few hours ago, which is why my call to you was so urgent. If you haven't heard from Kai yet, it's likely that you will soon, Vera explained. So about that. After describing the crazy coincidence to Vera about Kai having actually dropped her off for their appointment, The no-nonsense attorney could have been blown over with a feather. Once she'd recovered from the insanity of it all, her instructions had been clear. If they were to proceed with the dissolution, it would be best to facilitate all of their communications through their attorneys. That way, neither would exacerbate the situation by devolving into blame, accusations, and anger toward one another when, for the past 5 years, they'd at least been indifferent. With that guidance in mind, Jasmine did not call Kai like she told him she would after her appointment was over, but instead requested an Uber to retrieve her from Vera's downtown law office and take her to pick up her car from the dealership. Several hours after she'd returned home, showered, heated up some leftover stuffed peppers, and poured herself a glass of Pinot Grigio, Jasmine was still visibly and emotionally shaken. The divorce papers lay crumpled on the dining room table, the ink smudged by her tears. 5 years of believing she was free, and now this. Jasmine stared at the document, her heart hammering in her chest. She and Kai were still married. Legally, irrevocably, they were still each other's. Kai, meanwhile, was in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tight his hands were beginning to go numb. He dutifully dropped off Jasmine at some downtown office suite and had then jumped on a call with a client about a high-stakes deal that would secure his future when he'd gotten a text to give his attorney a call. It had taken about an hour to finish up his business call, but when he did, he'd immediately gotten back in touch with his lawyer. Scott Samuels had sounded breathless and aggravated when he'd answered the call. Ripping the Band-Aid off, the counselor instantly described the matter at hand. When Kai didn't respond with the shock or surprise due for a situation like the one they currently found themselves in, Scott had let him have it. Understanding the implications, Kai knew the reproving was warranted and deserved, so he sat quietly and endured it. At the time of their divorce filing, Scott had asked Kai if he was sure he wanted to go through with it. He'd even offered to fight and counterclaim if necessary. In truth, being served divorce papers at work all those years ago had been humiliating, but it had also been unexpected. Granted, Kai knew now how deficient of a husband he had been and had deserved the wake-up call, but he'd still been of the mindset that his success would supplant all the areas where he was found wanting. The reality spelled out on those papers, however, made him ponder and consider what good was success if he couldn't share it with the woman he loved, the woman he was supposed to have let go, but hadn't. Jasmine's mind raced back to the day she had walked out, the door slamming behind her with a finality that had felt like a death knell. Kai had been too busy chasing the next big thing, too ambitious to see the cracks in their marriage, and she, in her own way, had been just as guilty. Her own career had consumed her, leaving little room for the man who had once been her everything. Now, here she was, still legally bound to a man who had shattered her esteem and broken her heart. A man who, despite everything, still made her pulse race with a single look. A man who, she realized with a jolt, she had never truly stopped loving. Kai pulled up to Jasmine's house, his heart thudding in his chest. He had seen the divorce papers too, and the realization had hit him like a freight train. He was still married to the woman who had once been his world, and he was determined to win her back. As he approached the well-manicured front porch, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Jasmine opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise, and something else. Something that made his heart skip a beat. Hope, maybe? "Kai," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jasmine," he replied, his voice low and intense. "We need to talk." Inside, the tension was palpable, a thick, almost suffocating presence that hung in the air. Jasmine led him to the living room, her steps measured, her mind racing. She already knew what he was doing here, what he wanted. Kai sat down, his eyes never leaving her. "I saw the papers," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Jasmine nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "So do I. But that doesn't change anything, Kai. We're different people now." Kai leaned forward, his eyes blazing with intensity. "Are we? Because I see you, Jasmine. I still see the woman I fell in love with, the woman I let slip away." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. "Kai, don't." "But I'm not going to let you slip away again," he interrupted, his voice fierce. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm worthy of your love. I'll chase you, Jasmine. I'll chase you until you see that we're meant to be together. Jasmine's heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he had changed. But the pain of the past was still raw, still real. Kai, He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a stray tear. I know I hurt you, Jasmine. I know I was a fool, but I'm not that man anymore. I've grown, I've changed, and I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life proving it to you. Jasmine's breath hitched, her eyes locked with his. She could feel the heat of his touch, the intensity of his gaze, and she was inclined to believe him, to fall into the promise of his words. But fear held her back, the fear of being hurt again, of expecting too much. Kai leaned in, his lips inches from hers. She could feel his breath on her lips, the promise of his touch, and she wanted it, him, more than anything. But she pulled back, her eyes searching his. Kai, I need time. I need to know that you're serious, that you're not just pursuing the thrill of the chase. Kai nodded, his hand falling away, but his eyes never leaving hers. I'll give you all the time you need, Jasmine, but I'm not going to stop chasing you because you're worth it. You're everything. As Kai left, Jasmine stood in the doorway, her heart a chaotic mess of hope and fear. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Kai was back, and he wasn't going to let her go without a fight. And for the first time in years, she felt alive, her heart pounding with the promise of a second chance. The next morning, Kai sat in his office, poring over old photographs and letters, each one a reminder of the love they once shared. He remembered the way Jasmine used to look at him, with a mix of adoration and exasperation, as if she knew all his flaws and loved him anyway. He had thrown that away, and now he was determined to win it back. With a renewed sense of purpose, Kai set out to prove himself. He started by reaching out to old friends and colleagues, rebuilding the bridges he had burned in his pursuit of success. He threw himself into his work, not just to climb higher, but to show Jasmine that he was capable of balance, of putting love and family first. Over the next few weeks, Kai found himself in Jasmine's orbit more and more often, at charity events, professional development conferences, and even a chance encounter at the church they'd both stopped attending after the divorce. He made sure to be there, always respectful, always charming, and always just a little bit more than a friend. He could see the curiosity in her eyes, the way she looked at him as if trying to reconcile the man he was now with the one she had known before. One evening, after unintendedly crossing paths on the international aisle, when she'd literally run over his heels with her grocery cart, Kai found himself walking Jasmine to her car. The night was cool, and the stars seemed to shine just a little brighter as they strolled together. You know, I never thought I'd see you again, Jasmine said, her voice soft. And now, here you are, everywhere I turn. Kai smiled, his heart pounding. Maybe it's fate, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Or maybe I just never stopped trying to find my way back to you. Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes searching his. And what if I don't want you to find your way back? She asked, her tone challenging. Kai stepped closer, his gaze intense. Then I'll just have to convince you that you do, he said, his voice low and sure. Because I know what I lost, and I know what I'm fighting for, and I won't stop until I've proven to you that I'm worth it. Jasmine's breath hitched, and for a moment, Kai thought he saw a flicker of the old fire in her eyes. But then she turned, her voice steady as she said, "Good night, Kai." As he watched her drive away, Kai knew he had a long road ahead of him. But he also knew that every step was worth it, every moment of agony and longing, because at the end of it, there was a chance for redemption, for love, and for a future he had once thought lost. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Kai's pursuit was relentless, but it was also subtle, a slow burn that left Jasmine both frustrated and intrigued. He would send her flowers with no note, DoorDash her favorite coffee and scone to her job, or simply appear at her doorstep with a smile and a question. "Can I take you to dinner tonight?" Jasmine found herself torn between the past and the present, between the pain of their history and the promise of what could be. She remembered the way Kai used to make her feel, the way he could light up a room just by walking into it. But she also remembered the heartache, the loneliness, and the feeling of being second to his ambition. On a particularly pleasant evening, when his charm, coupled with her empty stomach, had worn her down, she'd agreed to meet him for dinner. As they sat in a cozy corner of a bustling restaurant, Kai reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. "Jasmine," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I know your wounded heart is my fault. I know I let you down, and I'm sorry. But I'm not that man anymore. I've changed, and I want to show you that." Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you. Besides, our attorneys believe that we shouldn't even be in contact with one another outside of their supervision," she noted, her voice breathy and fragile. Kai's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture so familiar and yet so new. "If you're not ready, then I'll wait," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I'll wait as long as it takes, because you're worth it. You've always been worth it. You're worth it." How long had she wanted him to say that about her, to believe that about her? Now, it seemed to roll off his tongue as naturally as the filtering air that expanded and emptied his lungs. Jasmine felt a warmth spread through her, a spark of hope amidst the ashes of their past. She pulled her hand away, but not before Kai felt the slightest tremble, the hint of a longing she couldn't hide. "We'll see," she said, her voice softening. As time passed, Jasmine found herself increasingly drawn to Kai. His persistence was both infuriating and endearing, a constant reminder of the love they once shared. She caught herself looking forward to their chance encounters, to the stolen glances and the teasing touches that left her breathless and wanting more. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, as they strolled through a park he'd convinced her to meet him at, Kai reached for Jasmine's hand, his fingers entwining with hers as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Jasmine started to pull away, but Kai held on, his grip gentle but firm. "Stay," he whispered, "just for a moment." She'd been about to agree when her phone rang. Pulling the device from her pocket to silence its insistent shrill, Jasmine noticed that the call was from Vera. "Give me just a second to take this," Jasmine excused herself, as she moved a little further down the path they were walking to speak to her friend privately. "What's up, Vera?" Jasmine asked, with a hint of caution in her tone. "I'm sorry to bother you with this on the weekend, but I've made some headway on the failed submittal," she stated. "Go on," Jasmine instructed, her voice low. "Well, since I didn't expect that Kai's attorney would tell me anything of value, I requested decrees, certificates, and supporting documents from the Clerk of Superior Courts. It turns out that Samuels was not even in the state when the filing was supposed to have taken place," Vera outlined. "Where was he?" Jasmine asked, her gaze locked on Kai, who was scrolling through his phone absently. "In Zurich, on vacation. That means that Kai would have been responsible for entering the final orders with the court," she finished coldly. "Correct. Now, the good news is I can present this development to the courts on Monday morning. That way, it should only take a motion for final orders to proceed instead of filing a whole new divorce petition. The not-so-good news, however, is that because original orders were not submitted on the date we'd anticipated, the courts will want you to complete a 30-day waiting period before granting an absolute divorce." "Waiting period? But why? We'd literally lived apart for the past 5 years," Jasmine ground out angrily between clenched teeth. "I'm sorry, Jazzy. The presiding judge is especially conservative on all matters family law. And besides, that's the statute as things currently stand," Vera explained sympathetically. As she continued to listen to her friend's guidance on next steps and recommendations, Jasmine could not help feeling like a fool. She'd spent all this time letting her heart thaw, letting Kai breach the walls of her defenses, and he'd withheld this very important truth from her. After promising to catch up on Monday and ending the call, Jasmine moved purposefully toward Kai. "Is everything okay?" he asked, immediately noticing the stricken look on Jasmine's face. "No, Kai, everything is not okay." Her voice vibrated with the hurt and anger that was surging through her body at this latest revelation. You are a liar." Kai's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing as he took in Jasmine's furious gaze. "A liar? Jasmine, what are you talking about?" Jasmine's voice trembled with rage as she spat out her words. "You knew, didn't you? You knew all along that the divorce wasn't finalized, and you said nothing. You let me believe we were free, that we could move on with our lives, but you knew the truth, and you kept it from me." Kai's face paled, but he didn't back down. "Jasmine, You what, Kai? You manipulated me? You played me for a fool?" Jasmine's voice rose, her fists clenched at her sides. "You came back into my life, acting like you cared, like you wanted to win me back. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? You just wanted to keep me strung along, to keep me from moving on." Kai's voice was low and intense as he responded. "That's not true, Jasmine. I did care. I do care. I wanted to win you back, to prove to you that I've changed. But I was scared. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd push me away forever." Jasmine's laugh was bitter and harsh. "And you think this makes it better? You think keeping this secret from me, lying to me because you still love me, makes you justified in this story?" Kai reached out, trying to take her hand, but Jasmine jerked away. "Jasmine, please, I was wrong. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But I was afraid of losing you again. I was afraid that if you knew, you'd never give me a chance to make things right." Jasmine's eyes flashed with anger and pain. "You're right, Kai. I won't give you a chance. Not after this. Not after you've lied to me, handled me, and played with my heart like it was some kind of game." Kai's voice was desperate as he pleaded with her. "Jasmine, please, I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I know I made a mistake, but I'm begging you to forgive me, to give me one more chance to prove to you that I'm worth it of your love."
Jasmine's voice was cold and final. "It's too late, Kai. You had your chance and you blew it. Now get out of my life and don't ever come back." With that, Jasmine turned and walked away, leaving Kai standing alone in the park, his heart shattered and his dreams of reconciliation crumbling around him. Coming and going without the threat of Kai showing up everywhere she went for the next 2 weeks had been the normalcy Jasmine had desired. That is what she kept telling herself as she looked around the sparse gym in the early morning hours before dawn, or took furtive glances up and down her street whenever she went to the curb in front of her house to check the mailbox. Yet, despite her well-won freedom, she didn't understand, nor could she shake the insistent feeling of loneliness that had overtaken her like a riptide. One evening, after a long day at work, Jasmine found Kai waiting for her on her doorstep. She hesitated, her unsteady breaths coming to her a little faster and more urgently than what she was used to. She wanted to tell him to leave her alone, to go into her home unfettered from his contrition and slam the door in his face. But there was something in his eyes, a mix of determination and desperation that made her pause. "Jasmine, please, just hear me out," Kai pleaded, his voice low and urgent. Jasmine hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door, then stepping aside to let him precede her inside. Following him to her living room, she toed off her heels as she stood next to the couch, her arms crossed over her chest. Kai sat down, his eyes never leaving hers. "I deserve your ire," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I know I lied to you, and I'm so sorry. But I can't keep living like this, Jasmine. I can't keep pretending that I don't love you, that I ever stopped loving you, and that I don't want to be with you." How many times were they going to do this? Kai's emotional bloodletting all over her, her lapping it up like a needy teenager,
and then her heart suffering the consequences of yet another unlearned lesson. Jasmine squeezed her eyes closed, her throat constricting tightly around a sob. Kai looked torn up and laid bare, but she was more worried about the shattered pieces of her own heart that she would need a broom and dustpan to collect. "Baby, I know." He was there, standing in front of her before she could react. Pulling her into his strong embrace, he just held her as her body processed a myriad of emotions she was feeling. "I never wanted the divorce. I only agreed because you were done, so adamant that we couldn't salvage it. And that was my fault. It was all my fault. I let you believe that you weren't enough, when the truth is, you were more than I could handle, more than I deserved." At that, the dam broke, and Jasmine cried openly. Kai kissed her temple, her cheeks, and every place where the tears flowed freely. He delicately caught one just at the corner of her mouth and immediately stopped. Jasmine hesitated as well, her heart stuttering in response to the overstimulation. She looked into Kai's misty eyes, searching for the truth, for the promise of a future she had once dreamed of. And in that moment, she saw it. Saw the man he was now, the man he was always meant to be. Kai moved in slowly then, first claiming the corner of her mouth, and then proceeding as his lips brushed against hers in a soft, tender kiss that spoke of longing and forgiveness, and of a love that had never truly faded. Vacillating slightly, Jasmine felt a shiver cascade down her spine, a surge of emotions that left her dizzy and breathless. She kissed him back, her hands reaching up to graze his close-cropped hair, pulling him closer as if to make up for all the lost time, all the missed kisses and stolen moments. Hoisting Jasmine in his arms, he headed purposefully for the stairs, unsure of his exact location, but convinced of where they needed to be. Kicking open the correct door on his first try, Kai found the elegant room he'd never thought he'd be welcome in again. Depositing her gently in the middle of the bed, he met her there and continued the onslaught of kisses and intimate caresses. Both making quick work of their clothing, they fell back onto the plush mattress, driven by passion and need. Jasmine's heart pounded as Kai's lips explored her neck, his touch igniting a fire within her that she had long suppressed. She could feel the heat of his large body against her smaller one, the strength of his arms cocooning Jasmine as they wrapped around her, pulling her closer. The room was filled with a tension that was both exhilarating and terrifying, a mix of passion and vulnerability that left her breathless. Kai's hands roamed over her body, tracing the curves and lines that he knew so well, yet felt like he was discovering for the first time. Each touch was a promise, a whispered vow of love and redemption. "Kai," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kai's eyes met hers, and in that moment she saw the depth of his love, the raw intensity of his desire. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a fierce, passionate kiss that left her dizzy and wanting more. Jasmine's hands explored his chest, her fingers tracing the muscles that she had once known so intimately. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, a rhythm that matched her own. She let her hands wander lower, feeling the firmness of his abdomen, the strength of her thighs. Every touch, every caress was a reclamation of what they had lost, a celebration of what they could have again. Kai's lips moved from her mouth to her neck, then lower, to her collarbone. He took his time, savoring each moment, each touch, each kiss. Jasmine arched her back, pressing herself against him, wanting more, needing more. "Please, Kai," she begged, her voice a desperate whisper. Kai looked down at her, his eyes dark with desire. Capturing her lips, he kissed her tenderly. "I love you, wife," he said. "I always have, and I always will." As the time passed and they lay there, their bodies entwined, Jasmine felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had forgiven Kai not just for the past, but for the present and the future. She knew that their road ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But she also knew that they could face them together, that their love was strong enough to endure. Kai shifted his weight from her smaller body and pulled her into his arms. He looked into her eyes, his expression serious. "Jasmine, I swear, I will never hurt you again. I will never take you for granted, never neglect you, never let my ambition come between us. You are my world, my everything, and I will spend every day of my life living up to those declarations for you." Jasmine smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I believe you, Kai, and I promise you I will never give up on us again. We are in this together, for better or for worse." Kai leaned down, capturing her lips in a soft, tender kiss. "For better or for worse," he repeated reverently. Slowly succumbing to exhaustion and the lethargy of their ardor, Jasmine felt a sense of hope and optimism for the future. She knew that their love was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth everything. And she was determined to make it work, to build a future with Kai that was stronger and more beautiful than anything they had ever known. That was her last thought before careening into a peaceful sleep, wrapped securely in his strong embrace. Determined to start over and build a new life, in the days that followed, Jasmine and Kai worked together to submit a voluntary dismissal of divorce to the sheer disbelief of Scott and Vera. They attended counseling sessions, talked openly and honestly about their past mistakes, and made a commitment to communicate better, to prioritize their relationship, and to never let their love fade. And as they stood before the judge, their hands clasped tightly, they made a vow to love and cherish each other, to support and encourage each other, and to build a life together that was more beautiful and vibrant than the one they'd lost to time. They knew that their journey would not be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, but they also knew that they could face them together, that their love was strong enough to endure. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose and a heart full of love, Jasmine and Kai stepped into their future, hand in hand, prepared to embrace whatever came their way, together.